here in New York, Maryland?
Pennsylvania.
Well, good evening to you and welcome to this program of Walter Rodney Groundings. I have a special guest with me this evening. He's Mr. Keith Branche, who is the press secretary of the WPA Overseas Associates, and he's visiting with us from Pennsylvania. And today we'll be talking about the WPAOA, and their perception of the politics in Guyana. I want to welcome you to Walter Rodney Groundings, Brother Keith.
Thank you so much, Deon. Happy to be here and to discuss with you, what we're doing as an organization supportive of the Working People's Alliance outside of Guyana. I want to bring you greetings, you and the party, on behalf of the Working People's Alliance Overseas Associates. I know that the brothers and sisters watch the YouTube version of the program, and they'll be watching on Sunday when this program is loaded to see what we have said and what was discussed. The hearts are our hearts are with you, and we work towards one goal, towards the enhancing the party as a party in the spirit of our late brother Walter Rodney. Before I start, I would also like to express our support to the actions taken by the government, and in relation to the flooding, the severe flooding that occurred on the West Coast. I myself was over there on Friday afternoon, and it was some flood. There were still houses that were inundated, and there was some swift action taken to help support. Now I think the cleanup is what is going to take place, and I know it'll be a lot of cleanup. It looks like if all the plastic bottles that were floating in the ocean came over the wall, so from miles along the wall on the land side, you can see the piles of plastic bottles in the debris. And in an agriculturally based community like that in the West Coast, I think we need to work quickly to prevent those bottles from getting into the irrigation and drainage ditches. So to you people on the west coast of Demerara, our hearts are with you, and we wish that there's a speedy resolution to the flooding, and you can get back in your homes quickly.
Well, you gave us some insight into the WPA Overseas Associates, but what, how formalized is this group, and who are the principals that are involved in the organization?
This group, it was formalized about 2 years ago, a little more. Prior to that, the organization, or the brothers and sisters who make up the organization, would communicate on a more ad hoc basis, talking about what can be done, what type of support can be given. But 2 years ago, under the stewardship of Brother Moses Bagwan, we came together as a group and decided to formalize our association so that we can give the direct support to the party here. Apart from Moses Bagwan, um, we have Brother Rohit Kanai, um, Brother Nigel Westmus, um, Brother Wazir Mohammed is there also. Um, we have um, Sister Trotz, Alisa Trotz, who she has asked for a leave of absence. She is one of our coordinators. We have three coordinators: Mike Henderson, Brother Rohit Kanai, and Sister Trotz. So Sister Trotz is, because of her commitments, and she's based in Canada, and because of her commitments, she has asked for a leave of absence. But she's still very supportive of us, especially in the area of drafting. She is good at getting our better statements out to the press. So those are the essential group of people. There's Brother Jai Pazram, who is also with us, and a few others who form the nucleus of the day-to-day activities and decision making. But then there's a wider group that consists of many others who give support and are members of, but do not act in a daily administrative capacity.
Okay, so how connected is the group with Brother U.C. Quayana?
Very connected.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, Brother Quayana was there at the inception, but and although he really serves as a very strong source of a strong and reliable source of reference, he is not really active day to day. Brother Yusuf still works very hard. He has a lot of irons in the fire, so to speak. I know he's doing some writing. I know he's still making presentations. He still appears on radio programs and TV programs in the Greater Atlanta area. I know very recently I heard him on the Caribbean radio doing an interview. So he's really active. He has a lot of irons in the fire, as I said. But on the WPAOA, from the WPAOA perspective, he is there. He calls regularly, and he is called regularly, but he's not a day-to-day administrative go-to person.
Well, at his age now, going to 94.
Yes,
right?
he is. He is just about getting to
right.
yes.
Right. To be active.
Yes.
As you were
Yes.
saying.
He still is very active. I know he goes for walks every day.
Okay.
So it's not he's sitting in an armchair somewhere, reading stuff on the telephone, newspapers. He goes for walks. He's in the studio with in Greater Atlanta area giving interviews. He's writing. So he's very active.
Okay, so the WPAOA, your association with the local organization, the Working People's Alliance, I know that being a member of that organization, sometimes we get a sense that there's some variances in terms of views on issues. How is the relationship between the two organizations?
It's very good. I think the Working People's Alliance differs from the other political parties in Ghana because essentially it has always encouraged free thinking, and that is part of the entire process. And the WPA Overseas Associates has had differences in approach to the Working People's Alliance in Guyana, but we have worked it out more or less through correspondence, discussions. We have been able to overcome any differences because essentially we're working towards the same objective. It's just a matter of the differences about how we get there, and the approach to getting there. but the objective remains a common objective.
So, on a larger perspective, how do you see the role of the WPAOA in relation to the scenario, the political scenario in Guyana, as an agent of possible change and influence?
Well, we believe that the instrument of change would have to be the WPA. We in the overseas department, so to speak, cannot be agents of that change. What we can do is facilitate by means of our support this Working People's Alliance in Guyana, making those and impacting the society in a form of change. So whatever resources that we have, in terms of not just financial resource, but intellectual resources, the coordinating activities and so on. If we can bring our influence to bear in terms of providing some of those resources and prompting the change here in Guyana, I think that would be one of our essential roles.
Okay, that's great. But if we reflect on the formation of the coalition, when WPA was asked to become involved in the APNU coalition, there were varying views. Particularly, we got a sense that some persons were not very much in favor of that kind of integration. Was this a general perspective of members of the WPAOA at the time?
Well, I think that they're in any organization like the Working People's Alliance, Overseas Associates, different people have different views on a single matter, and there's no commonality in terms of understanding, but and there's still members who have some kind of reservation, but generally there is support for the Working People's Alliance in the Partnership for National Unity. I just remember the WPA, and many people forget this, that the WPA was just not, how should I put it, they didn't join APNU. They were instrumental in APNU formation in the first place. And many people overlook that and say, well, you have all these other parties, but those parties are parties that came in after. It is the Working People's Alliance who were instrumental in getting the PNC to form this organization that is now the coalition in government. And although individual members may have believe that the process is not working as speedily, as cohesively as it should, it is yet something that we have helped to bring to bear as a political organization in Guyana, and we continue to support that process.
Okay, it's critical, but as from a personal perspective, looking back at the period before elections, and looking now at what has been happening, based upon the 23 years of the PPP governance in the country, from a personal perspective, not as a WPA or a broad view, how do you see that approach to alleviating the sufferings of the people at the time? What was your perspective on the idea of having, based on the nature of our constitution and all of that, having a broad-based political grouping that could rid the country of what has been a force that reigned terror on the backs of the people that mismanaged the economy, that did all the things that any reasonable thinking uh, populace would want to rid itself of.
Right. I want to say that the People's Progressive Party, Civic, would argue that they are a broad-based government, that they are not just a People's Progressive Party, but they are a civic component, so they're broad-based. And now we have the Partnership for National Unity, a Partnership for National Unity, which is made up of several political parties that represents a spectrum. You have the People's National Congress, which is really the People's National Congress Reform, and then you have GAP, which is an Indigenous People's Party, with the WPA and the National Front. It's a wide collection of parties representing several different facets of life in Ghana. And this party also claimed, or this coalition also claimed, to represent the masses of people. Important to me is not just what you claim to represent, but what you do when you're in government to involve the people in the process of democracy. And I think that governments, and especially third world governments, and Ghana is absolutely no exception to that, have in a way not given the kind of regard to the opinion of the populace once in office. And governments have to start trusting the people
and
listening to the people. The people know. They know. And I'll tell you, you asked me about Brother U.C. Kwayana just now. I'll tell a story he told me. He said that in the advent of the present political struggle that, in Ghana back in 1955 or thereabout, there was a woman in Buxton who was deaf, hearing impaired. And there was this struggle between the colonial government and the local parties and so on. And this is a hearing impaired woman called him and told him that the colonial government was going to suspend the constitution, and told him why. This is a woman who couldn't hear.
Okay. But she was
on top of the politics.
Right.
And the constitution was suspended, and the government was thrown out of office.
So you cannot underestimate.
You cannot underestimate the people, and our consistently governments have been underestimating the people. And you need to trust the people. They know.
One of the things that people often contend when persons like you who are overseas, when you attempt to influence the politics that we have taking place locally, they tend to believe that you are out there and you don't have a true sense of what is happening with the local politics, and hence your decisions and your comments and concerns may sometimes not be truly reflective of what is happening. Do you get the sense that there is some disconnect with people overseas and the politics as it really plays out on the ground here?
No, I don't think so. I think that in some instances we know what is happening before people on the ground here know. I'll give you one example. I just mentioned to you before we got on live that there was a fire in Kitty this morning. Somebody texted me at 6 o'clock this morning and asked me about the fire. I'm here. I didn't know. And that is true for a lot of issues, a lot of political issues. I there are instances where we have contacted the Working People's Alliance executive here in Guyana and asked them about situations that we have heard taking place within the government. And we're saying to them, what is your position? Did you hear about this? What are you doing about it? And sometimes they don't know. They haven't heard about it.
Okay.
And so that, to me, is where the disconnect is. There's a disconnect between what APNU should be doing and what they are doing. It seems as though the decision-making process in APNU is the decision-making in terms of policy is made in the cabinet. The cabinet should be an executive forum where decisions that are made by APNU as a coalition, APNU's executive, those decisions on where they want to go in terms of the manifesto and what they promised the people and so on, those decisions should then be taken to cabinet. And cabinet as an executive body would ensure that there's a process put in place to achieve these objectives. But instead, I think those decisions that should be made by the executive of APNU are now being made in cabinet. So the information that is being emanating from those decisions in cabinet are not meeting the people, because cabinet is not that type of forum. So a decision is made in cabinet. The cabinet secretary or the
Minister of
or
State.
the Minister of State who reports, because I don't think he's a cabinet secretary. The Minister of State who reports on the activities of cabinet then answers questions to the press. But those are based on cabinet decisions. APNU executive should be meeting regularly and letting the people know how they're going to fulfill this manifesto that they campaign on. And all the parties that are represented in the cabinet or out of the cabinet would be there at that executive, knowing what is happening, putting in the 2 cents, so to speak, reporting back to their party executives, and being able to generate the interest and to get their supporters involved in what is taking place. I don't think that some of the major party like the PNC, their rank and file supporters are even aware of what is taking place in APNU.
So there really should be no disconnect.
There should be no disconnect
between the party and the government. There is a view among some that the government is there to govern, the party is a kind of separate entity. How can we, disintegrate the two?
But the look in this, except in places like maybe the United States, where the president, although he comes from a party, has the right. He brings in a cabinet that is made up of, and even in those circumstances, the party still exerts a lot of pressure and influence. But to say that the party should not be involved should not be integral in ensuring that the government keeps its promises is not real. When the persons who were in government went out to seek the office, they went out as part of that party. and now that party is saying to you, this is what we ran on. These are the principles that we hold dearly. This is what we promise the people in terms of development. And now we're saying that you should get to work doing these things. And we don't feel that connection is there. Um, and because of that, I think because of that gap in the communication process, the PPP has had the opportunity to march into it. I mean, Mr. Former President Jack Doe is everywhere talking about what he can do and what he couldn't. I mean, he didn't do when he was there, but now he's talking about what he can do. You have former President Ramutar writing letters in the newspaper every day. Anil Nandalal, I mean, he's there, pounding the pavements with his missives every day, so to speak. And it's a bombardment of information coming from all the levels of the PPP. Every time you open a newspaper on the internet, someplace, Jack Deere is there with a smiling group of people, and very prominently sometimes there, Afro-Guyanese in the foreground, shaking his hand or something. And people are friendly. They would shake his hand if he's there. They wouldn't chase him away. But from a propaganda perspective, it makes good press. But on the other hand, our communication as APNU needs a lot of work. I mean, we're hardly out there. All we get is like official statements, and you go online and the office of the president or APNU itself have posted an official statement, but there's no constant information of what is being done, how it's being done, the new roads that are being built, pictures of it in the press, pictures of it on the social media, houses that are being built, pictures of it on the social media, you're bombarding all the websites. People ought to know that things are being done, but that ground has been ceded by APNU to the PPP.
So we've had several controversial decisions that have been made by the APNU, AFC coalition, and would you attribute that to the same disconnect that you outlined between party and government, cabinet, as one of the reasons why sometimes decisions are made that really are not in keeping with what we may call rational thinking people may arrive at, and with what the people may generally want to see happen in the society?
Yeah, I think so. I believe that this process by which government and cabinet operate takes away from the broader opinion giving. I mean, when you have the president is head of the cabinet, and it's difficult to get the kind of freewheeling communication or discussion in that forum as you would get, say, at an APNU executive meeting, where people feel freer to give opinions. These people at the APNU executive would not be ministers of government. Their jobs would not depend on the president or any other official. These are people who come from a party level, who maybe a sugar cake salesman in Buxton, or a dal puri vendor in Haslington, and those people come there and they would say what they have to say, and get it done, and so the information will be disseminated. While the more people will be involved, the government will then know how people are thinking out there. But as it is now, because everything is closed and locked at that cabinet level, it stifles that kind of free thinking.
Yeah, and it also um, alienates alienates persons who have valid contributions to
Yes.
make
Yes.
to the process.
Yes.
But the contradiction in that is that when the bad decisions are made, that the very party that you've decided to exclude has to come on board to help bail you out sometimes in
Yeah.
terms of, you know, doing your public
Yeah.
relations to clear up the mess
And
you have created. And
I can tell you from a WPAOA perspective, this is a real source of contention.
yeah,
I mean, a real source of contention because, you know, there are members of the WPAOA who says like, what are we doing? We are here in this government, supporting this government, and these decisions are being made, and now, we don't know about it. Somebody would call me and said, Keith, we heard, and I would confirm that this is true, and I'd call the party here, our contact person, and ask them, well, did you hear that this is happening, or did you know that this has happened? And I said, no, I got to check it out. And these brothers and sisters here represent the party at the APNU level. And so that has to change. That really has to change. I don't know if if merely talking about it here would bring any change, but you hope that sometime before 2020 that somebody will sit down and say we cannot go in to the election at 2020 without some cohesive program, and in order to gain that cohesion we have to bring all our constituents into the decision-making process, all our political party into this decision-making process. It has to be done. I mean, it's absolutely necessary. We cannot go into the election process as a one-man band. It's not going to happen.
okay, but when the elections come, you can't go as a one-man band. What you have to talk again that you're reflecting the broad
Yes.
picture of a coalition of parties to contest.
Yes.
And
But-
then when elections are over, you abandon the framework that could have gotten you there.
Yeah, but I think as I said, if you put that framework in place, and you believe in that framework, you believe that this is how the country should be governed, and these democratic means is what's going to move the country forward. If you abandon that, you abandon the people.
All right. Well, apart from these concerns, what other concerns do you, as members of the WPAOA, share? There, I mean, constitutional reform.
Yeah.
I know you all have been talking about.
Yes.
That. What exactly are you looking for in terms of constitutional reform?
Well, we were happy that the president had set up that committee with Hughes to put together a framework, and I think that he has submitted his report to the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister had reported to Parliament that's something that this report. I don't know. I don't think he has tabled it in Parliament, but at least he has submitted. However, the parliamentary process works, he has notified Parliament that this is something that's going to be on the agenda. Nothing has happened since then, and we feel there's an urgency. constitutional reform, I think it's is the basis for which Guyana are going to move forward. Too often, and I know back in 1980 when this constitution was written, and we called it the Burnham Constitution, it didn't come on stream through any fair democratic mean, and it was a constitution written with Burnham in mind, the late President Burnham, and subsequent to his passing, Desmond Hoyt became president, and he put reforms in place, economic reforms, and he was able to do that almost single-handedly using this Burnham Constitution. He also single-handedly denied the people a democracy using the same Constitution, and since that time, the feeling was this Constitution has to be changed, and successive governments, Jagan, Chetty Jagan, PPP, Janet Jagan, PPP, never did much with the Constitution. Under President Jagdeo, there were some changes made. Now, Jagdeo himself is challenging those changes that he made. And that's one of the things that ought to be discussed, because it's a contradiction that, and he has his followers on the social media who champion all the changes that Mr. Jagdeo, that came in the Constitution after while Mr. Jagdeo was president, and his former Attorney General Anil Nandlal wrote a very lengthy piece in the press a few days ago, a week ago I think, outlining all these changes that took place under President Jagdeo, including the term limit. And now Mr. Jagdeo himself is challenging those term limits. Because the contradiction is that if term limits don't stand the appeal process, what about all the other pieces of changes that took place at that time? Are you say, but when the court if the court pronounces and supports the Guyana Chief Justice's position, Justice Chang, that the term limits is unconstitutional, all those other changes that were put in place at that time, are they also going to be unconstitutional?
And that leaves us in a quagmire.
That leads us back to the 1980 Constitution. So constitutional reform is very important. We need to give the people more power. We need to restore more legislative and administrative executive power to the National Assembly. We have to have more decision making there. Just look at the situation with oil. Everybody knows that there is a huge oil find and the Exxon Mobil issue and so on. But there have really not been a full-fledged debate in Parliament on this oil up to today. The oil was found, Exxon is out there, they have the equipment out there, they're staging their material here as we speak, but Parliament has yet to sit down and discuss this under a different constitutional makeup. This issue would have been on the floor of Parliament long ago, but it's not. And now we're finding that the contract that we have signed with Exxon Mobil is flawed. It is flawed in several ways. I have read it. I'm not a legal guy. I've read it. I've read the submissions in the media from our brother Clive Thomas. I've read the submissions in the statements made in opinions made in the media by Mr. Christopher Ram and others. And personally, and this is not a WPAOA position, but personally, I do not have a bigger problem with the 2% royalty as I have with the other parts of the contract, that
Monitoring and all of that.
the monitoring and the fact that ExxonMobil has no responsibility for environmental issues. Now, one huge environmental spill, oil spill, and
Take-
this,
Takes out the entire coastline.
but we have to clean it up, and that is millions and millions of dollars. I think when when um, when BP spilled that oil in Louisiana, Texas, there, it cost like $3 or $4 billion just to get the process going. They're still cleaning there. They're still cleaning there, and it's not just our coastline. It's Deon. It's the Barbados coastline. It is the Surinamese coastline. It may be the Tobago coastline. It may even be our good friends the Venezuelan coastline. What would happen if the Exxon spills the oil and it's on the Venezuelan coast, and we have to go over there and try to clean it up? You know, that to me, that can wipe away all our gains for years to come. And it is, and again, I come back to the fact that if APNO had brought this issue to the executive of that coalition, and the coalition had sat down and discussed this and look at all this. I mean, each party would have discussed this within its own executive, and within its own groupings. I would have come back to the APNO executive and say, this is what our people are saying. Now, when Minister Trotman and his advisors sit down to negotiate with ExxonMobil to get this new contract in place, they would have had a better idea of the feelings of the people. But instead, they went out and they signed this contract. Now the contract is the ink is dried, and it's out there. The people are saying it's a bad contract. Now what do you do? It's already signed. I know a lot of people are saying, well, you can go back and you can renegotiate. Companies don't do that. They're not going to go back and renegotiate. It's already signed. What are you going to do? You know, these issues should have been discussed prior. It's not that if you say, let's renegotiate, and Exxon say we're not renegotiating, you're going to go out in the ocean and take the oil and kick Exxon out of here. It's not going to happen. Exxon can close the well down for 10 years. I think there's some time limit where they have to drill, and they can come back and say, okay, we're going to start drilling. They can you know, maybe put some new pipelines in there at the cost of $2 million, and then go off again for another 10 years. You know, it's the pressure is not on ExxonMobil at this point in time. It's on us. We have inked a contract that has given Exxon a free pass in terms of monitoring, in terms of environmental responsibility, and you know, the president is saying that we're not going to renegotiate this contract. Maybe, but maybe we can have some amendments to correct those environmental and monitoring issues. The base of the contract can remain the same, but maybe we can go and get some amendments to the contract to take care of those two issues. That is a big concern, a major concern for us.
Yeah, but you know, one of the concerns I have is that when these things are done, we've had to wait almost a year and so on for the release of the contract and all of that. But you get a sense that there is a deep intolerance for the people's intervention and the people's questioning of matters that really are not you know, you get this idea that government believes that they are the beginning and the end.
Yes.
That the people, after they are elected, do not matter. And so when people seek to guard their own interests, that there is deep intolerance and rejection, and sometimes the utterances suggest that there is a total lack of respect
Yeah.
for
Well,
the populace.
I did say earlier that the successive third, not just in Ghana, but third world governments in the whole, have have not shown any confidence in their people. And this is one good example. You know, you run for election, you go out there, you you tell the people that you represent them, you ask for their support, that you represent them, you know, fairly, and you have their welfare at heart, and then you elected to office, and the last thing you want to see are the people. You don't want to see the people anymore. Um, I have had friends tell me that prior to the election of this government, they could have called a minister on the phone and talked with him or her. Now, let us understand that now that you're a minister of government, you have a lot of responsibility, and you may not be able to pick up the phone and answer a call from a friend as easily as you would have prior to you becoming a minister. But today it is all pervasive. It is not just one a complaint or two complaints. I've heard complaints that several ministers, no time at all, under and I want to refer to the old Burnhamite PNC days, even under those stringent conditions where the elections were not free and fair, there were still times when the ministers set aside to meet the public. I can remember my mother going to the Ministry of Housing to meet Kami Ramsaruk, who was then Minister of Housing, to talk to him about housing. The ministers set aside a time. These ministers here are so busy. If they can't answer a friend's call, there's no time set aside. People have gone to the ministries to get answers. They can't find anyone to get an answer from. And it have this foolish dress code. Up to I'm staying in Bachelor's Adventure, listening to somebody in the bus coming down, and the minibus, and they were saying, well, they will say, well, I forget my shoe. She was going to government, and she forgot to put on the right kind of shoes. That should not be. That should not be. I mean, you Guyanese people are very, and this is my experience, they're very conscious of where they're going. In the United States, you go to church and people have on a pair of jeans, a flip-flop, and a t-shirt on a Sunday morning. Guyanese people never do that. They're always conscious of where they go and how they dress. And I think that if a person is going to meet a minister, I don't think that they walk in there with a pair of flip-flops and a shorts and a pair of shorts. But I think if that person is passing the administrator, they just, oh, let me go and pick up this voucher. They may have on a pair of sneakers and a shorts. They may have on a armless dress, because this is a hot country. They may have on an armless dress. Now they go to they can't go in. They got to get another bus fare to come back. I mean, what kind of nonsense is this? And again, that's one of the ways we separate ourselves from the people. Yeah. That you say that the people must dress up to come in here. the man who you asked to vote for you in Crabwood Creek, the woman who you asked to vote for you in Den
Went
Amstel,
to the polls with
the
bare
people
feet and so on.
the people who went to the polls with bare feet and no shirt now must come and dress up to see you to get a voucher or to ask a question and so on. A few years ago, it is a year ago or thereabout maybe, there's a woman was driving along Wolford Avenue, and she was speeding, and she struck down some St. Lucian scouts and injured some. And the whole question surrounded the woman and so on, and her careless driving. But when I read that article, I saw that she went to pick up her kid at school, and they wouldn't let her in because she was not properly dressed. That, to me, is the essence of the story. How frustrating it must be for you as a parent to drive from all the way from your house to go to the school to collect your child, and a security guard at the gate saying to you, you can't enter the school because you're not properly dressed. My child is in there, I can't get my child. So you get back onto the road and you're angry and you're driving back home to get the proper shoes or the proper shirt or whatever to wear, and misfortune hits you, strikes, and you hit the children and injure them. It is the foolishness that caused that to happen. That dress code issue must come to an end. I know the president said it should end, but no one has taken action. You expect that these ministers will say, now the president has said so, let us look to implementing a change in this policy. But you walk down the street and you pass by the government ministries and offices, and there's still a sign there saying, this is how you should dress. It is absolutely ridiculous.
Okay. All right. Well, time is almost on us. I know that you also have views on sugar in as brief a manner as possible. What are your concerns, or what are your views on the current situation with the sugar industry?
Yeah. Well, I want to say from a Working People's Alliance Overseas Associates point of view, there has been a division in how it is argued and how it's seen. There are basically two schools of argument. There's a belief that the sugar could have continued as it was, okay, and a better system of management put in place to make it economical. And there's the other group that feel that sugar as it is now is no longer economically viable. It must be reorganized. So those are the two separate groups of trains of thought from two separate groups of people in the WPAOA. But I think there's a unanimity in the fact that the process by which this reorganization and or by which sugar has been handled is a disaster. First it was announced that one sugar estate was being closed, and then that was denied, and then another one was being closed, and that was denied, and the question was asked in Parliament to the Minister of Agriculture. How many estates would be closed, and how many people would lose their jobs, and he gave one figure, and I just apologize. That's my guy on the phone. I forgot to shut off. How many people would be laid off or terminated, and his figures were different to the figures from Guy Suko. They were different to the figures that were given by the Minister of State in the office, in the Ministry of the Presidency. And so there, then those estates were closed. They didn't have money to pay severance. Some of our elders, Brother Kwayana, Sister Andy, and Brother Moses Bagwan, they wrote a letter saying that you must pay a severance. Subsequent to that, there was some severance paid to the group that were earning below a certain amount. The others got half of the severance, with the other half to be paid in a few months. And so at least that was a start. Then now we're reopening those estates because the fact is, and no company would come to Guyana and buy a sugar estate that is closed and shuttered with cobwebs and vermins. If you were to go into to sell any entity, a sugar estate, a timber mill, a bakery, you have to have it running. If it's not running, you wouldn't get value for it because the buyer would see that as scrap. What would you do with a sugar factory that is closed and shuttered? The guy comes to buy it, or the group comes to buy it, they look in there, they don't know what's working. You can't sell that for a reasonable fee. If it's working, the company, the group of people walk in, the sugar is being made, you can bargain and negotiate a price for that entity. So now I guess maybe they try to sell it and they realize that they couldn't because they were all shut down. Now they're going to restart those factories. I see they're advertising for cane harvesters again. So the whole process has been so badly managed and so badly handled that you were going to close these estates, but no conditions were put in place for these cane harvesters who were going to lose their jobs. I know when ex-President Jack Deon had built the Berbice Bridge over where he built it now, there was a lot of condemnation because it nearly drove New Amsterdam into bankruptcy because New Amsterdam depended on that ferry for commerce. I think the whole town was built because of that ferry. Now and you can say the same now for sugar. Many of those villages survive, not just the cane harvesters and the families, but the woman who sold food, the shops that sold milk. I mean, they all survived on the commerce done by the sugar industry in that community. Now you're closing that factory, and there's no consideration for what's going to happen with those villages. What's going to happen with the economy? There's no support. There's no amelioration. What Desmond Hoyt had called that thing in Linden, impact the amelioration program that they had put in place for the bauxite workers after the IMF came down with the draconian measures. There's nothing like that for the sugar industry. There was no thought.
You're talking about LEAP?
LEAP, yes. There was no thought put into thinking of what we're going to do for these people, for this village economy when sugar is gone.
All right, well, time has caught up with us and we must shut off, but we need to take the political consideration, and to bring that into question in the closing of the industry. If you're trying to win support, then you can't, make people feel that you're not working against them.
Yeah.
Even though it may take some constraint on the economy for elections are just 2 years down the road. We could have warned that, and then that oil would have been coming down.
Yes. There should have been more thought given to that.
Okay, but it's been a pleasure having you on the program to have you express the views of people who are overseas and their concern for what is happening in Guyana. And I wish that more of you, when you do come, that you would encourage your brothers to come on board and let's hear how they're thinking so that we can get a better sense of, you know, what is happening out there and we can really rationalize in terms of what we're doing and how you're thinking and get a common understanding. Thanks
Sure.
for being here, and I do hope that you're leaving pretty soon, that
Sure.
you have a safe journey back
Thank
to
you.
the States. And do express our appreciation for the work that WPAOA is doing in North America.
Thank you, Brother Deon. It's a pleasure being here, and I I hope that what I said would make sense and
It
and,
did.
and help your ratings.
Alright.
But thanks again for having me on your show.
Okay, to the people out there, it's been a pleasure being with you. Continue to be with us every Sunday evening on this channel. And next week we'll have another program of Walter Rodney Groundings. A good night.